Hey, what's good? Welcome back to the Somatic series. This chapter, chapter 13, focuses on what trauma is from a somatic perspective, the basics of trauma, how long-term trauma affects our brains and the rest of our bodies, and the relationship between trauma and systemic oppressions. In order for us to understand trauma from a somatic perspective, we have to talk about neuroception one more time. So here are the highlights. Neuroception is your body's ability to tell if you are safe or in danger and how to respond to that situation. In seconds, your body uses information from the people and things around us, from inside yourself, from the systems all around us, from past experiences to help you figure out what you need to do to be safe. Ideally, you'd be out there minding your business, living life, and then your body, specifically your autonomic nervous system, would notice a stressful thing. Once that happens, your autonomic nervous system would activate your fight-flight response. Then you'd start feeling some of that cortisol, some of that adrenaline, and that would give you the energy you need to address the situation and return to safety. Once you're safe, your ventral vagus would kick in and your body would then be able to return to the chill state it was in before that stressful thing even happened. Okay, so now that we talked about an ideal situation, let's talk about a less than ideal situation. And your autonomic nervous system notices a stressful thing. At that point, your neuroception would then kick up a fight-flight response. You might feel stressed or anxious or angry as your body tries to make sense of what's going on in your environment and what's going on inside of you. At that point, depending on the situation, your autonomic nervous system could decide to freeze, to buy yourself some time. It could fawn to try to please whoever needs to be pleased for your own safety. Going on autopilot, emotionally disconnecting from a situation. So what do we call it when the stress of the situation overwhelms our fight and flight and freeze and fawn survival responses? We call that trauma. Trauma is the complete, overwhelming, overpowering of our body's ability to handle a stressful situation. Literally, it's a level of stress that overwhelms your autonomic nervous system's ability to handle the situation and regulate back. So in that moment, shutting down, like a complete dorsal vagal shutdown, is our body's way to protect us from the full intensity of the trauma. So trauma is generally talked about in three categories: acute, chronic, complex. So acute trauma is one traumatic event that has a start and an end. Think of a car accident. A car accident begins, it ends. Chronic trauma is a trauma that lasts weeks, months, years. Think an abusive relationship, child abuse, chronic pain. Chronic trauma is experiencing lots of different traumas at once. So having a history of child abuse, experiencing systemic racism, medical trauma, fat phobia, queer phobia, homelessness, experiencing, 2, 3, 4 plus traumas at once or in a lifetime turns one's trauma history from chronic to complex. Sometimes trauma can come not just from the traumatic event itself, but also from your conscious mind trying to make meaning and make sense of what your autonomic nervous system did during the traumatic event. Remember, your autonomic nervous system is making these survival crisis decisions way faster than your conscious mind can even catch up. And if you don't have a solid relationship with yourself, it can be really confusing to try to figure out why your body decided to freeze or fawn or fight or run away in a particular situation. And that confusion can lead to resenting yourself and developing a story of the kind of person that you think you are as a result. And those resentful stories, those narratives we create about ourselves. I ran away because I am a coward. I froze because I'm weak. I fought because I'm evil. I fawn because I'm a pushover and I deserve it. Those narratives can actually get in the way of healing. Part of somatic work and working on your relationship with yourself is understanding your autonomic nervous system and why your body responded in that way. Learning to have grace for yourself and your autonomic nervous system, and then using your growing knowledge to be even more intentional with yourself in the future. Healing a trauma is not just about the details of the traumatic event, it's also about understanding how your body responded in the past and how your body communicates with you now. Chronic and complex trauma affects your ventral vagus's ability to help you deal with a danger or a stress and regulate yourself right back. And what happens as a result of this is you don't have an opportunity to release pent-up energy that you have in here. That anxiety, that fear, that anger, restlessness, that's like fight, flight sort of feelings. And if you don't have the opportunity to release those things and process those things, they stay in you. This can make it harder to feel safe, to rest, to connect with people, feel close to people, the things I highlighted in the video on stillness. Now, regulating your own emotions and being attuned to your autonomic nervous system is easier said than done if no one ever taught you how, and no one created safety for you to learn and make mistakes as a child. Being able to handle our own emotions is not something that humans are born knowing how to do. Childhood is technically supposed to be a low-stakes time for humans to get comfortable with their autonomic nervous system, comfortable with their feelings, with their complicated emotions, and explore and practice managing them with the support and instruction and coaching from their parents and the other adults they trust. That all said, many of us have more experience dealing with stress and trauma than we do having a safe space to work through our emotions. And if you don't have that practice as a child, it is very easy to be dysregulated and triggered, especially if your past experiences lead you to the conclusion that most people cannot be trusted. And all of this can lead to having a nervous system that does not know how to tolerate stress all that well. And that can look like shutting down at the first sign of any stress, however big or small, being in one long shutdown state for months or years, and or going back and forth between a fight-flight state and a shutdown state for every little stress. All right, now let's talk about some of the effects of long-term chronic and or complex trauma on the brain. So our prefrontal cortex goes completely offline whenever we are stressed or triggered. Why is that important, right? Why is our prefrontal cortex going offline when we're stressed or triggered important? Our prefrontal cortex going offline when we're stressed or triggered limits our ability to critically think. our ability to pay attention, hold attention, and it affects the quality of our decision making, while also changing how we interpret our own emotions and how we interpret the emotions of other people as well. Our hippocampus is very sensitive to stress. So the hippocampus is the part of the brain that is important for verbal memory and learning new information. Chronic stress and or trauma can lead to problems with memory and learning new information. Our memories are organized through the brain's limbic area, specifically the amygdala. The amygdala links our emotions to our memories, what we learn, and all our literal senses, sight, taste, smell, sound, touch, balance, our ability to sense what's going on in our bodies, and our ability to tell where we exist in space. All of that information gets lumped up into one time-sensitive package. Think like a time capsule. Why this is important is because our neuroception uses that time capsule to determine whether or not we're safe in the here and now. Whenever we are triggered, our neuroception thinks back to the last time we felt exactly like this, and it sees if there's anything that it can learn from our past in order to help us get out of this situation. Now, sometimes this is great. It saves us so much time. We're able to take what we learned from our past based on what we can sense what's going on right now. Our autonomic nervous system makes a decision. It's exactly what we need to be doing. We get to safety. We're able to regulate with someone else. We're good, right? But sometimes our autonomic nervous system miscalculates, and we end up making decisions or acting in ways that go against our own best interests. We act out of fear or out of anger, and it isn't what we would choose if our prefrontal cortex was turned on. And that's why you might find yourself acting out of character when you're stressed out or when you're scared or angry. Instead of acting like your current age, you might notice feelings you felt when you were 14, or feelings you haven't felt that way since you were in college, or you haven't felt that way since you lived with your parents, or maybe you start feeling how you felt in a previous relationship. In that moment, all of your wisdom from this current era goes right out the door the moment your prefrontal cortex goes offline, and then your nervous system relies on the old ways. Chronic and complex trauma affects your body's ability to regulate out of survival responses and back into your chill ventral vagal state. This is important because chronic and complex trauma can cause people's autonomic nervous systems to have really intense responses to the people and things and situations around them, which can lead to people having really intense emotional responses. Someone's autonomic nervous system might decide to stay in a chronic state of crisis as a don't gotta get ready if you stay ready sort of response to life. And also, if you're in a chronic state of crisis all the time, then that means that your prefrontal cortex is turned off a lot of the time, or at least is limited a lot of the time, which definitely has a major effect on any decision making that someone has to do. Or that person can find that they may not be in a chronic survival state all the time, but it's easier to slip into the survival mode, and you find yourself making rigid choices even at the first sign of stress. Our autonomic nervous system affects how we interpret people's body language, how we interpret their facial expression, their tone when they speak. With long-term trauma, with chronic or complex trauma, over time our bodies become used to being in this survival mode all the time. Problems managing stress, problems managing your emotions, problems connecting with people become part of our habits and eventually become part of our personality. And these issues, dealing with stress, thinking critically, and managing emotion, affects people's ability to feel truly safe in their close relationships and safe connecting with people. All right, I think we should pause here because I think this video is getting a little long. I will drop part 2 the exact same time. Part 2 will connect everything you already know about trauma with how long-term trauma affects the rest of the body and how systemic oppressions affect trauma.